What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. I want to continue to examine 100 years of world championship fights. We're going to take a look at a fight that took place March 8th, 1971. It was on a Monday night. One of the greatest buildings of boxing would be New York's Madison Square Garden. It was labeled the fight of the century. And what made this fight so compelling? Muhammad Ali was 31-0 with 26 knockouts. Joe Frazier was 26-0 with 23 knockouts. Both men would win Olympic gold medals in their respective games. Muhammad Ali would win in Rome in 1960, and Joe Frazier would win in Tokyo in 1964. They were both undefeated, both undisputed world heavyweight champions. You had ring announcer Johnny Addy. Arthur McCanty was the referee. The best blow-by-blow commentator money could buy be Don Dunphy. Archie Moore will give color commentary. You had Frank Sinatra, who was the ring announcer. Everyone was there. Men were wearing mink coats down to their ankles, mink hats to match, leather suits. They had Rolls Royces parked outside. This was perhaps the greatest fight in the entertainment industry of all times. Now, I've always had Joe Louis and Max Schmeling, 1938, as the greatest heavyweight championship fight. But the greatest fight in boxing history that had all the elements, the contrasts in styles, everything you can think of, this fight had. Now we're going to take a look at this fight. But I want to go down to the lineage of heavyweight history, starting with Jack Johnson and Tommy Burns. And we're going to work our way up to this current fight that took place March 8th, 1971. So December 26, 1908, Jack Johnson would knock out Tommy Burns. The fight took place in Sydney, Australia. 14 rounds. Jack Johnson weighed 192 and Tommy Burns weighed 168. The referee and the promoter was Hugh McIntyre, and the police would stop the fight. It was at the camera because they did not want this to be recorded. May 19th, 1909, Jack Johnson would defeat Philadelphia Jack O'Brien in 6 rounds. But it would be considered a no decision. Jack Johnson weighed 205 pounds and Philadelphia Jack O'Brien weighed 161 pounds. June 30th, 1909, Jack Johnson would defeat Tony Ross, fought him in 6 rounds. In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, it'd be a no decision. Jack Johnson weighed 207 pounds and Tony Ross weighed 214 pounds. September 9th, 1909, Jack Johnson will fight a 10-round no decision without Kaufman, San Francisco, California. Johnson weighed 209 pounds and Kaufman weighed 191 pounds. The referee was Ed Smith. October 16th, 1909, Jack Johnson would knock out Stanley Ketchel. 12 rounds. Ketchel weighed 205.5 pounds and Ketchel weighed 170.5 pounds. The referee was Jack Welch. October 16th, 1909, Jack Johnson knocked out Stanley Ketchel. And that actually changed the script of the way boxing was viewed. Because both men had an agreement. Stanley Ketchel crossed Jack Johnson, although he was tagged early in that fight. But he saw an opening, so he tried to take out Jack Johnson and Jack Johnson would remove teeth after a beautiful right hand that was thrown, that would stretch out Stanley Ketchel, crucifixion style. And Stanley Ketchel would become a part of the canvas. July 4th, 1910, Jack Johnson would knock out Jim Jeffries, Reno, Nevada, 15 rounds. The referee was the promoter, who was Tex Rickard. Jeffrey would retire and make a comeback. He would lose 100 pounds. He would go 15 rounds, a terrible beating during the course of the 15 rounds. And Jim Jeffries, who was a former heavyweight champion, who was mocking Jack Johnson the entire time, calling him the N-word, every chance he could, would step in and not allow Jim Jeffries, who was the great white hope during that time, not to be knocked out. Now, Jack Johnson had some problems with the government during 1912. And Jack Johnson would be accused of violating a Mann Act because he was claimed to have escorted a white girl across state lines. The Mann Act was not created at the time when that happened, and the white girl was married to Jack Johnson. But they wanted to nab Jack Johnson because of his brash and bold predictions and his lifestyle. And they would find a way to get him. December 19th, 1913, Jack Johnson drew with battling Jim Johnson in Paris, France. 10 rounds. The referee would call the bout a draw. And this would be the first fight that two black men would fight for the World Heavyweight Championship, other than the Colored Championship. This was a big deal. Now in 1909, Sam McVeigh, Joe Jeanette, would fight 3 times that year. Second time they would fight would, in my estimation, be the greatest heavyweight championship fight. They were fighting for the Colored Heavyweight Championship belt. It was 32 knockdowns in that fight. Joe Jeanette would go down 27 times. Sam McVeigh would go down 6 times. It was one of the most brutal heavyweight championship contests in all of boxing. Joe Jeanette needed a paper bag just to be able to breathe. And Sam McVeigh would have a bucket of water thrown over him. Both eyes busted, broken nose, broken hand, and he couldn't continue. 49 rounds of destruction between those two men. January 1st, 1914, Ed Gunboat Smith, who won a White Hope Heavyweight Championship title by knocking out Arthur Perkley, 15 rounds, San Francisco, California. The referee was Ed Smith. July 16th, 1914, George Compartier would win the White Heavyweight Championship title from Ed Gunboat Smith. He won on a foul in 6 rounds. The fight took place in London, England. The referee was Eugene Corey. April 5th, 1915, Jess Willard would knock out Jack Johnson in 26 rounds. It was a controversial conversation, if you will, because it was stated that Jack Johnson would make a deal with the government. March 25th, 1916, Jess Willard would fight 10 rounds with Frank Moran, New York's, and he would win a decision. Moran weighed 225 pounds. The referee was Charlie White. So Moran would weigh 203 pounds and Jess Willard would weigh 225 pounds. July 4th, 1919, Jack Dempsey would knock out Jess Willard. Toledo, Ohio. He would beat him to a pulp. He would break his jaw. He'd break 6 ribs. Give him a broken eye socket. 4 metacarpals would be broken in the right hand of Jess Willard. It was perhaps one of the most brutal heavyweight championship contests in all of boxing, outside of Joe Jeanette and Sam McVeigh. September 6, 1920, Jack Dempsey knocked out Billy Misk, Benton Harbor, Michigan. 3 rounds. And Dempsey weighed 185 pounds and Misk weighed 187 pounds. And the referee was Jack Darby. What a contest that was. Billy Misk would eventually die of bright disease, kidney failure. And he would give his family, a night before he would die, or at least be rushed to the hospital, one of the biggest Christmases known to man. He would have his last fight with a fighter by the name of Bill Brennan. Some story. December 14th, 1920, Jack Dempsey knocks out Bill Brennan, New York's Madison Square Garden. 12 rounds. Jack Dempsey weighed 188 and a quarter pounds, and Bill Brennan weighed 197 pounds. The referee was Hopskips. July 2nd, 1921, Jack Dempsey knocks out George Compartier, Jersey City. Stopped him in 4 rounds. Dempsey weighed 188 pounds and Compartier weighed 172 pounds. The referee was Henry Ankle. July 4th, 1923, Jack Dempsey won on points when he defeated Tommy Gibbons, one of the most boring 15-round fights that would take place. It took place in Shelby, Montana. Jack Dempsey weighed 188 and a quarter pounds and Gibbons weighed 175 pounds. I always considered Gibbons a light heavyweight. He had a brother that was better than him. His name was Mike Gibbons. One of the best middleweights in boxing history. Very underrated he was. September 23rd, 1926. Gene Tunney would win a World Heavyweight Championship crown in Philadelphia. 10 rounds over Jack Dempsey. Jack Dempsey weighed 190 pounds and Tunney weighed 189.5 pounds. Gene Tunney was America's light heavyweight champion. He would also win the AEF, America's Expeditionary Forces, light heavyweight championship crown. Gene Tunney was a macho boxer. He was something else. September 22nd, 1927, Gene Tunney will once again defeat Jack Dempsey on points in Chicago, Illinois' Comiskey Park. It was actually Soldiers Field. 10 rounds. Dempsey weighed 192.5 pounds. Tunney weighed 189.5 pounds. The referee was Dave Barry. It was the famous long count. And you had Battling Nelson with a stopwatch, who counted 14 seconds. And Jack Dempsey had negotiated in his contract that he wanted a man who was a fallen fighter to be allowed the opportunity for the man who knocked him down to go to a neutral corner. And he forgot his own rule and he went directly to the closest corner. And that count was interrupted. Dave Barry would escort Jack Dempsey to a neutral corner. That would buy some time for Gene Tunney. Gene Tunney would defend his heavyweight championship crown against the man who he wanted from, Jack Dempsey. July 26, 1928, Gene Tunney would knock out Tom Heaney. New York, 11 rounds. And he would retire as undefeated heavyweight champion. Now, Gene Tunney weighed 192 pounds and Tom Heaney weighed 203 and a quarter pounds. Referee was Eb Forbes. June 12th, 1930, Max Schmeling and Jack Sharkey would get it on. Max Schmeling would claim foul. Jack Dempsey would be on looking on. Jack Sharkey would be disqualified. Max Schmeling would become the heavyweight champion of the world. June 21st, 1932, Jack Sharkey defeats Max Schmeling. Defeated him on points on Long Island. Fought him 15 rounds. Jack Sharkey weighed 205 pounds and Schmeling weighed 188 pounds. And the referee was Gunbo Smith. June 29th, 1933, Primo Carnera knocked out Jack Sharkey, Long Island City, 6 rounds. Carnera weighed 260 and a half pounds. Sharkey weighed 201 pounds. And the referee was Arthur Donovan. October 22nd, 1933, Primo Carnera defeats Paulino Escudante. Defeated him on points in Rome. 15 rounds. Carnera weighed 259 and a half pounds. Escudante weighed 229 pounds. Referee was Maurice Nickards. March 1st, 1934, Primo Carnera would defeat Tommy Laughlin. He defeated him on points in Miami, Florida, 15 rounds. Carnera weighed 279 and a half pounds. And Laughlin would weigh 184 pounds. And Tommy Laughlin would be a light heavyweight champion. They called him the Philly Phantom. And he would be the reason why that tournament would begin when Gene Tunney would vacate his title. It would be Tommy Laughlin who would leave the light heavyweight division and take on Jack Sharkey. And that's how the tournament would begin. Tommy Laughlin would get his opportunity for a heavyweight championship shot against Primo Carnera. But he would be defeated. June 14th, 1934, Max Baer knocks out Primo Carnera, Long Island City. It was the Long Island Bowl. 11 rounds. Max Baer weighed 209 and a half pounds and Primo Carnera weighed 263 and a quarter pounds. The referee was Arthur Donovan. And in that building, no fighter has ever defended his championship in any weight division at the Long Island Bowl in New York. June 13th, 1935, Jim Braddock defeats Max Baer. One of the biggest upsets in boxing history. Defeated him on points in Long Island City. 15 rounds. Max Baer weighed 209 and a half pounds and Jimmy Braddock weighed 193 and a quarter pounds. The referee was Jack McAvoy. June 22nd, 1937, Joe Louis knocks out Jimmy Braddock. Chicago, Illinois, Comiskey Park. 8 rounds. Joe Louis weighed 197 and a quarter pounds. And Jimmy Braddock weighed 197 pounds. The referee was Tommy Thomas. And this would be the first time that a heavyweight championship bout was seen worldwide between a black fighter and a white fighter. The first time a black fighter would knock out a white fighter who was champion was Jack Johnson when he knocked out Tommy Burns in Sydney, Australia, 1908. But the cameras were cut off. But this time, everyone saw this knockout, and it changed the entire script of the way boxing was viewed. On August 30th, 1937, Joe Louis defeated Tommy Farr. Defeating him on points in New York's Yankee Stadium, 15 rounds, and Tommy Farr weighed 204 and a quarter pounds. Joe Louis weighed 197 and a half pounds. Referee was Arthur Donovan. February 23rd, 1938, Joe Louis knocks out Nathan Mans, New York's Yankee Stadium. 3 rounds. Joe Louis weighed 200 pounds, and Mann weighed 193 and a quarter pounds. Referee was Arthur Donovan. And everyone was voting for Nathan Mann. He was from New Haven, Connecticut. And Joe Louis, who was the champion, was booed. Nathan Mann was cheered. And this was amazing. January 25th, 1939, Joe Louis knocks out John Henry Lewis. New York's Yankee Stadium. 1 round. Joe Louis weighed 225 pounds. John Henry Lewis weighed 125 pounds as well. The referee was Arthur Donovan. That fight was actually at New York's Madison Square Garden. It was at New York's Madison Square Garden, and that's the same building that Muhammad Ali would face Smoking Joe Frazier. Now, to skip a few fights, January 31st, 1941, Joe Louis knocks out Red Berman, New York City. 5 rounds. February 17th, 1941, Joe Louis knocks out Gus Duranio, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. March 21st, 1941, Joe Louis knocks out Abe Simon, Detroit, Michigan, 13 rounds. April 8th, 1941, Joe Louis knocks out Tony Mustio in St. Louis, Missouri. They were beginning to call this the Bum of the Month Club. May 23rd, 1941, Joe Louis would win on a decision from Buddy Bear, Washington, D.C. June 18th, 1941, Joe Louis would knock out Billy Conn, 13 rounds. Joe Louis weighed 199.5 pounds. Billy Conn, they say, weighed 174. But in the record books, you'll find 168 pounds for Billy Conn and 200 and perhaps 4 pounds or so for Joe Louis. Now, January 9th, 1942, Joe Louis would knock out Buddy Bear. It was at the Naval Relief Fund, where Joe Louis would donate his entire purse. He would do the same thing for Abe Simon, for the Army Relief Fund. He wouldn't accept a dime, and that's when his tax problems would begin. June 19th, 1946, Joe Louis knocks out Billy Conn, New York's Yankee Stadium, 8 rounds. And when a young Muhammad Ali would find this information out, this is why he took the attitude that he had. How Joe Louis, who would serve his military and be taken advantage the way he took advantage. Now, Muhammad Ali uses conscientious, objective, religious purposes. But he saw how Joe Louis was being treated. You know, Joe Louis was one of the greatest heavyweight champions of all time. And he would face Jersey Joe Walcott, 1947. And Joe Louis didn't defeat Jersey Joe Walcott. They gave it to Joe Louis. But June 25th, 1948, Joe Louis would knock out Jersey Joe Walcott. Knocked him out in 11 rounds. And Louis weighed 213.5 pounds and Walcott weighed 194 pounds. And the referee was Frank Foreman. And what was interesting about those two men, they would both have the same trainer. His name was Jack Blackburn. But Jersey Joe Walcott couldn't commit to boxing. He had a family to raise. He would be in sanitation, so he would come to the gym when he could, take fights at short notice. And Blackburn would take on Joe Louis. Didn't want Joe Louis at the beginning, but when he saw the skill set, he saw he could work with him. Joe Louis would retire, 1949. So there would be a tournament between two men that was elected by Joe Louis. Ezzard Charles, they call him the Cincinnati Cobra, and Jersey Joe Walcott. And Ezzard Charles would defeat Walcott, and he would become the NBA heavyweight champion of the world. And this was a big deal, because Ezzard Charles, who would start boxing as a featherweight, he had a record of 42-0. Won every prestigious title as an amateur that can be won. And he would take on the Black Murderers Row. He would defeat Charlie Burley twice and Archie Moore 3 times. He would fight Lloyd Marshall, Joey Maxim. He was well deserving of this title. But then in 1951, he'd be knocked out by the man who he defeated for the title, Jersey Joe Walcott. Walcott would be knocked out in 1952 by Rocky Marciano. Marciano would now become the heavyweight champion of the world. He would hang up the gloves in 1956, where Floyd Patterson would face Archie Moore, get rid of him in 5 rounds, and he would become the brand new heavyweight champion of the world. Now, Floyd Patterson was also an Olympian. He would win the 1952 Helsinki Games. And he would be the first American to win a gold medal. He won in the middleweight division in 20 years. 1932, Harry Wiley Sr., perhaps one of the greatest trainers in boxing history, would bring home 5 medals, 3 bronze and 2 gold. And one of those participants was Lou Salica. He would wind up becoming a bantamweight champion in the professionals. But Harry Wiley Sr. would also support Henry Armstrong, who tried out for those games in 32. Didn't quite make it because of his style. The Floyd Patterson would be knocked out by Ingmar Johansson. He would knock out Ingmar Johansson. And then he'd be knocked out by Charles Sonny Liston. Muhammad Ali would defeat Charles Sonny Liston in 1964. 1964, when Muhammad Ali became the heavyweight champion, the same year, Smoking Joe Frazier would win the Olympic gold medal in Tokyo. He was eliminated Buster Mathis Sr. But when Buster Mathis Sr. break his hand, Joe Frazier would step in and win a gold medal. And here we are today. March 8th, 1971. Why this fight was compelling? Because the title was broken up. When Muhammad Ali would take on Charles Sonny Liston in 1965, there was a clause in the contract that Muhammad Ali would adopt from Sonny Liston when he faced Floyd Patterson. It was a rematch clause. And it was good enough for Floyd Patterson and Sonny Liston, but it wasn't good enough for Muhammad Ali and Sonny Liston. Because it was ironic when Muhammad Ali would change his name. He would announce that he was a member of the Nation of Islam. The WBA would now have a problem recognizing Muhammad Ali as the heavyweight champion of the world. So that title would now go up for a tournament. And you would have Ernie Terrell, who would face Eddie Machem for that title. He would defeat Eddie Machem. He would now be the WBA heavyweight champion. Muhammad Ali would defeat Ernie Terrell in a famous What's My Name fight. This title would now go up for tournament because they wouldn't give it to Ali. And Jerry Quarry and Jimmy Ellis would fight for that crown. As for Joe Frazier, he would take on Buster Mathis Sr. for the WBA. He would win the WBC. He would be granted the WBC, but it was for the New York SAC Heavyweight Championship belt. The WBA went to Ernie Terrell. and when Ernie Terrell would lose to Muhammad Ali, and went vacant, and Jerry Quarry would face Jimmy Ellis. So I just wanted to make that clarification. So now you would have Joe Frazier taking on Jimmy Ellis to unify the division. And he would knock out Jimmy Ellis in the 4th round, one of the most brutal left hooks in Madison Square Garden history. And he would now be the unified heavyweight champion. And the best fight that you can make would be Muhammad Ali and smoking Joe Frazier. Let's take a look at this fight in its entirety in the next video.